Okay, today I'm going to show you how to import data into R, which is basically a matter of formatting your data as a text file in a format that R is expecting to see, and then using a few simple commands in R to import it and then verify that you imported it correctly. As an example, I'm going to use USGS, the USGS website. USGS surface water site's got a lot of data from a lot of sites, and just as an example, I'm going to look at dissolved oxygen in streams, because we'll be able to use that to demonstrate the graphical capabilities of R. And I went to the USGS site and I found that they have 4 sites along the Russian River, and so I decided I'm going to grab the data from those sites for the last 5 years and save it as a tab file. So I press submit and wait for the site here, and when it responds, it's going to send me a file. I'm going to download a file with this data called DV. And the first step is going to be to open this file with something to format it and make sure it's in the right format for R. And I find Excel works pretty well for that. So we're just going to bring that over to Excel, even though it's not an Excel file, it's a text file. Excel can open it, and this is the data that we just downloaded. It's actually got a lot more than we want. We really just want dissolved oxygen, the median value here, which is this column here. So in general, we want to get this so that the top row contains the names of our variables, and then the data itself, the variables, start in row 2. We only want to include the data that we need, and we also need to make sure that we format the year correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of a lot of this stuff up here. We're going to go and right-click, delete, and we don't need this first column, so I'm going to delete it. It just says USGS. We do want the site number. We do want the date up here, and it was that last 16 that we really want. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these and delete these columns. Okay, so now there's no data obviously in these first few lines, but if you move down, this is where it starts. A is a code on the USGS site that means it's approved. So what I'm going to do is sort this data by column D here and bring all the A's to the top. Sort by column D. And here are the A's then. So let's go ahead and make it. Remember, we just want the top row to give the names of our variables. I'm just going to name this date. This is DO. And this column, actually, I'm just going to, I said A is approved. If we move down far enough, eventually we'll get to where it says P for provisional. And we just want the A's. So I'm going to go ahead and find where the P's start, and I'm going to go ahead and just delete all of these rows all the way down to the bottom of the spreadsheet. Right, now I've got 4 rows, I have 4 columns. I don't really even need this last column anymore, so I'm going to delete it. Now we've just got our site number, our date, and our dissolved oxygen. Last thing we need to do has to do with the format of the dates. You recognize those dates, but they're not actually in the right format. It turns out there is the correct way to write a numeric date. Don't just take my word for it. It says so right here on XKCD. We want a 4-digit year, dash 2-digit month, dash 2-digit day. So let's go ahead and highlight this column and tell Excel to format it the correct way. Custom. I'm going to type YYYYMMDD. There. Now those dates are correct. Now this data is in a format that it corresponds to the defaults in R. So this will make it a lot easier if we just format it like this. Where do we save this file? Well, we need to save it in R's working directory. Right? The way we find out R's working directory is we open up R. And we use a command called get working directory, get WD. Now in general, whenever you want to find out about a command in R, you type help and then the command in parentheses, and that'll bring up a web page that tells you everything you need to know about that command. And really, for get working directory, there's not much to know about it, honestly. We just type get working directory, and it tells us the working directory is in the My Documents folder. So for me, it's Chris/Documents. That's where I want to save this file. So I'm going to save it as in the Documents file. Verify it's users Chris Documents. And I'm going to save it as a CSV just because that's what I'm used to working with. And I'm going to call it RR_DO. Save. It says, are you sure you want to save it as CSV? Yes, we are. So there we go. Now it's saved. How do we import it into R? Well, to import it into R, we use a command called read.csv. So let's go ahead and get the help on that. CSV. Read.csv is a subset of read.table, but in general these are very similar. You just give it the file name, and then if you have to give it any other arguments, it follows the file name. The only argument we're going to need to do is column classes, because we need to tell R that that second column is a date. So we need to give this data a name within R, so I'm just going to call it RRDO. We say that equals read.csv. The file name, remember, was rr_do.csv. Right? And then we're going to say call classes equals, C means combine. And we're going to combine NA is what you say when you tell R just import it as it is, just use the default, and you can do that for numbers. The second column was the date, right? And so we have to tell it a date, and then that third column was another number. So this is what the command looks like. Oh, and you can see I spelled classes wrong, alright, so I just press up arrow. That brings the last command I typed in. And let's go ahead and spell it right this time. And there, it looks like it read it correctly now. How can we be sure though? Well, there's a command called list, ls. If we do that, it tells us all of our variables, and there's RRDO. So we now have something called RRDO. If we want to find out a little bit more about it, we can type str, which is structure RRDO, and it tells us it's a data frame. That means that it's got 3 different variables in it, and they all have the same length. The first one, site number, is an integer. That's what int is. The second one's a date, so it, because we told it was a date, R knows that it's a date. And finally, DO is a number. So it's looking good pretty far. We could actually take a look at this if we want by using view, which you need a capital V in view RDO. This actually brings up a little mini spreadsheet here, and so we can actually look at it and see, all right, here is all our data. And so it's looking good. In the next video, I'll show you how you can now make some plots with this data.